Welcome to a Simple Therapy podcast. Real conversations, brave stories, and simple, soulful insights for therapists and anyone on a healing journey. I'm Sindee Gozansky, licensed therapist, supervisor, and a fellow human figuring it out too. Around here, we believe healing doesn't have to be complicated, and that leading with your heart still matters. We talk about what it really means to be human in and out of the therapy room. You'll hear from therapists, mental health professionals, and people courageously sharing their personal healing journeys. Because whether you're the therapist or the client, we're all human here. Let's keep it simple and keep showing up. Hello and welcome to another episode of a Simple Therapy podcast. I'm Sindee Gozansky, your host, and today I am really honored to welcome today's guest, Dr. Nima Rahmany. Dr. Nima is a transformational healer, attachment and relational anxiety specialist, and the creator of the Overview Method. Dr. Nima's work is deeply informed by his own personal and professional evolution. After many, many years of practicing as a chiropractor, he began to recognize that physical symptoms often had roots far deeper than the body alone. This realization, combined with his own painful and awakening relationship experiences, led him into an in-depth study of attachment, trauma, and the nervous system. Through his healing personal journey, which we'll talk about, he came face to face with patterns of relational anxiety, disconnection, and self-abandonment that we're all going to hear in ourselves. These experiences ultimately reshaped the direction of his life's work. That is so brave in itself. So he has helped thousands of people around the world in breaking free from toxic patterns, reconnecting with their authentic selves, and creating relationships rooted in safety, presence, and truth. I'm so excited for this conversation, and Dr. Nima will be sharing so much with us. If you want to check out his website while we start talking, it is drnima, drnima.com. Welcome to the podcast.
It is so great to be here, Sindee. It's interesting because I've just gone through a rebrand. So you can go to that website, but it's now called becometriggerproof.com. So it'll automatically redirect you. So everything still works. But over the last couple months, I've been going through a major identity alchemy, which is ironic because this is what I help people through. And we're always called to upgrade our identities into kind of like who we're wanting to be. And as this year has turned around, I'm now more committed than ever to helping break cycles of intergenerational trauma and to help families heal. That's really what this work is about allowing that crap that we were born into to not pass to the next generation.
Yeah, we need that more than ever in our world and in our families. As we record this, it's at the beginning of the new year, 2026, and probably it'll come out later, but many of us have just spent time with our families for the holidays and probably got a little triggered from some of those intergenerational traumas. So we're going to talk about the trigger, becoming trigger proof. And most of the therapists in my audience, help their clients with triggers all the time. And
that's right.
I love your unique approach to it. And we're always doing our own growth and self-development.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're helping people through this type of thing, it's like the medicine that we're giving to others is often the medicine that we needed. And my mess became my message because, we teach what we most needed to learn. And I can have a really successful chiropractic practice, just a wizard at helping people through their emotional challenges, giving them perspective. But the question that led me into this work was the realization that all of the cognitive awareness did not mean anything in those moments of activation when it mattered the most in my relational dynamic, which caused me to react in ways that I'm profoundly embarrassed about. And it was in that search of understanding, okay, how can somebody so intelligent who helps other people react the way that he did so that a day later or hours later or 2 days later, he's totally embarrassed. And so I had to go through an entire legal process. I pled guilty in a court of law.
Oh,
So the police had to be involved so that it could wake me up and go, Nima, wake the F up.
yeah.
Resolve what's unresolved. And, you know, by the grace of God and the blessings of doing this work, I've now really seen how important it is for people to learn how to become trigger proof, which doesn't mean you don't get triggered. It means you can integrate from that conditioned self-abandonment that happens every time we get triggered, which was my greatest discovery.
Amazing. Yes. There's so much here. And thank you for just jumping right in. I also love my mess is my message. We can all take so much of that, for ourselves, which is true. And it's okay. We're going to have some shame and embarrassment, but what do you do with it? And what you did was really take that in and transform yourself. And maybe we can start there. I mean, I know a little of your backstory, but it is compelling. And we all have iterations of that, I think, most of us as humans in relationship.
Yeah. Well, here I am. People would say, they come to my office, they'd get adjusted. Like, Dr. Nima, you have magic hands. And I always felt like people coming in to see me were dealing with stress-related problems. So I'm adjusting them, but then they're going back home to these dynamics, or they're still, at the effect of their trauma responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so am I really helping them? And it wasn't until I started dating, after I got divorced to my ex-wife, lovely woman. We're great friends to this day.
Ah,
And then
I have one of those too.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then I
Lovely
went through
man, and we're still friends.
and then we went through this series. I went through this series of one failed relationship after another, leading to this really toxic dynamic. I didn't understand codependency at the time, although she told me that she used to do CODA. She was part of like code. I'm like, what's CODA? She's like, Codependence Anonymous. So she's in recovery from CODA. I didn't know what that was, which I was learning. And so I didn't know what a trauma bond was. And this relationship that I got into with her, former sex worker, and also then turned into kind of like a madam who was running kind of like an online ring of it. I was so drawn to the sexual nature of the relationship and the fact that she just fit so perfectly within my business, my personal life, sexually, all of that. She just became this person that I could not live without all of a sudden because I was transitioning out of chiropractic. I also would work on her with my methodology and helped her with her food sensitivities, helped her with her emotional issues. And she kind of secretly, there was this little covert deal that we had going, was that I was lacking the confidence to leave chiropractic and really teach this methodology to people. And she needed some sort of legitimacy from her, dark underworld. So she wanted some sort of a bridge between sex work and legitimacy. And so I provided that for her, plus the methodology to help her deal with her emotional issues. So we had this covert kind of rescuing operation going on, which is the foundation of all trauma bonds.
Yes.
So we're
going to come back to rescuing and the trauma bonds for sure. Right. So, and just so we kind of like really grasp this, there's a way you each fit into each other's lives, and like we're filling a puzzle piece, whether it was like appearances and everything that was perfect for your life or the legitimacy that she needed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so we entered this deal, which is, I didn't understand it at the time. I'm kind of tracing you back to answer your question, is that most toxic relationships start off as a co-rescuing operation. Okay. And this is most trauma bonds. And there's a spectrum of like the totally like the abusive types with the coercive control, and then the ones that are real toxic push-pull dynamics, right? So with us, we both are highly intelligent, highly accomplished people. And we entered in at this transitional period where we both wanted to kind of like live a dream. And we started this kind of shared fantasy. I had this fantasy where I wanted to travel the world, leave my office, and then teach full time. She had this fantasy of a power couple dynamic. So we both kind of piggybacked off of each other's fantasies, and then mixed in with the sexuality. And then, of course, the toxic shame of what she did for work, which I was never going to bring home to mom and pop. And now things started to get successful for both of us, and my community started building. And on this
Mm.
foundation where it wasn't based on two people that could regulate themselves and that had loved themselves and that had worked through their wounds. So we were actively seeking each other to give what we were both missing from childhood. And that's where it all began. And it turned, fast forward 4 years, it turned volatile, toxic, push and pull. We became abusive to one another. And I thought, how could somebody whose hands are used to heal people, help people heal, use them to reach out in anger and actually slap his girlfriend? And
Yeah.
so the question of that led me down a path of anger management. And then I discovered somatic experiencing. I discovered the polyvagal theory, shadow work, attachment theory. I stopped working as a chiropractor and I just dove all in. And I thought, if I can make sure, A, this never happens again. B, how do I make sure that, first of all, how did this happen? Number one.
Right.
B, how can I make sure this never happens again? And C, if I can do that, is it possible for me to have a healthy relationship? Can I have what I've never had before? Because I've been successful at work, but it doesn't translate into healthy dynamics where we're both all in. And so I
Yes.
met my
Dr.
sweetheart,
Nima.
Diana, and
Right.
now I teach what I most needed to learn.
And you met your sweetheart.
There you go. Yeah. And we
Yeah.
have a 5-year-old son now. And so this is why I'm teaching what I'm teaching.
Beautiful. Such a blessing. And I want to just slow you down and go back a minute because this is so important. And your generosity in sharing your experiences and the vulnerability is really going to help us shift our perspective. So
Cool.
when you talk about the relationship became abusive, maybe, share a little about like what it was on her end and how you would get triggered. And then, the ultimate response that crashed everything.
Yeah. Well, you got to understand it's the drama triangle. Yeah. To unpack it, we have to understand that it all starts with a rescuing operation. And her job in rescuing me was to rescue me from my lack of self-worth in owning that I could lead this thing and lead being a chiropractor. She handled all the business side of it because she's really good with that. And so she rescued me from the responsibility of owning my value and taking care of the back end stuff and delegating because I could do it for a fraction of the cost because she was getting her needs met with this shared fantasy that we were going to be a power couple dynamic. And
Mm-hmm.
so it all begins with this unconscious covert expectation that that other person should save me from something, right?
Exactly. The co-rescuing happens, each partner to the other. And you speak with so many gems. I just have to underscore that she
Sure.
rescued you
Sure.
from you taking the responsibility for your own worth
Correct.
and value. We
That's
do
right.
not hear that so much.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's very painful to look in the mirror because when we start this process and things get toxic, we want to tend to blame first ourselves, then the other person. But there's as you go through the process of becoming trigger proof, the whole concept of fault and blame falls to the wayside. And you have this deep understanding. And by understanding it, understanding is another, to love is to make the effort to understand. So to make the effort to understand you and the other person, to love them and yourself is the way that you transcend to that next level. And so where does it get toxic and volatile? Where after the love bombing phase, where both of you are pedestalizing one another,
Right.
you start to get high off of the other person's supply, off of the fantasy, off of the possibility. And life is not a positive without a negative. There's no fantasy without reality. And when the
Right.
other person doesn't tend to live up to your projected ideal of them, you then feel betrayed, you feel abandoned, and then the reaction happens. And we go from the honeymoon phase to what's called the power struggle phase, where my overwhelm from her emotional dumping and her emotional neediness and overwhelm and her anxiousness, which is the codependency of needing connection, was suffocating me, just like it was with my mother, causing me to want to actually pull away and need space, which actually activated her even more, which made her more critical, more judging, more blaming, more pushing, which led me to want to run away even more. And this is the anxious avoidant trap, where
Anxious-Avoidant.
I would literally want to leave, and she would physically say, barricade the door and say, no, you're not leaving, and then go into criticism and blame. And then the escalation would happen.
Yeah.
And so as it would happen, it would escalate. And there's two little children, whose nervous systems are like piggybacking off of one another. And then eventually it would escalate into, some sort of, verbal abuse, mental abuse on her end, and then me getting reactive and then doing the slap. And so there's different forms of violence that happen. This isn't to make it okay. This is to help understand. There's the coercive controlling type, where it's like, you can't see anybody, you have to stay home. And then there's the situational type, which two people activating one another, and then shit happens. And so we were the situational type. I had to really understand it to make sure that this never happens again. And so luckily, my wife and I are in such an amazing relationship where conflict happens, but then we have processes to regulate and then repair, because I had never learned those skills. Regulate, repair. These are the skills that I had to learn. So that's what happened.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I love the description of couple violence, because we're not here talking about domestic violence per se, like intimate partner violence, in the way that most people view it. But I can't pronounce their names, but I've studied with some Belgian EFT therapists who also define the violence as you've described in couple situations. It's either proximity seeking, close seeking, which is what she would do going toward, or distance seeking, which is what you would do. One reason I'm so excited to have you talk about your personal experience again, and you've highlighted throughout, we're both intelligent people, we hold jobs, we're professionals, all of these things, come from good families. Maybe we'll talk about that down the road. And this kind of violence can happen. Violence, abuse, whatever you want to call it, can happen in relationships. And I've seen, in my own experience as a couples therapist, or also training other therapists in that work, so many couples therapists won't even touch, as soon as they hear any kind of incident of something physical or something that like rises almost to that level, they don't even want to see the couple. And those couples need help. And you give such a perfect example of what if we could help, you guys really understand what's going on. Look at the attachment, look at the reasons you're seeking, closeness or distance, and then the triggers and the responses that come up. And so we're not going to solve this now, but I just encourage anybody who's listening to maybe think twice that, there are ways we can still work with people. You're still working with two humans who came together for a really important reason.
I'm going to pause you there. If the therapist hasn't done their own healing work on that topic, that what they're signaling when they're saying, I don't want to work with that, is I haven't worked through my own relationship with it. Maybe it's happened to them and they're not okay yet. Maybe they lived through it. And so I'm going to just piggyback. You don't have to work with anyone you don't feel comfortable with. And if you are somebody who's walking other people through that, it is an invitation for you to see. This is what trigger proof really is all about, is that if you're triggered by it, not to run away from it. It's to help you reveal parts of you that are not okay with it, you're either going to keep avoiding it and run away from it, or when I hear it, people reach out to me after they hear my story. They send me these emails. They tell me their stories. And they're like, I've been turned down by all these therapists. And I'm like, okay, I understand why they would do that, because they don't feel they have the capacity to be able to be non-judgmental guides for you through that, because they will merge their story into yours. So that's just a token of their capacity, not your badness. So finding somebody who isn't shy around that because they've done their own healing work on it. And so therapists, I've now noticed there's two types of them. They're the ones that teach from kind of like cognitive awareness because they have the degree, because they want to, psychologists or therapists who got the degree because they wanted to, they had their own, they thought that the degree was going to help them work through their shit.
100%.
Then there's this, which sadly it doesn't. It gives you cognitive awareness, but you could still be an asshole in your relationship. And some of my clients were the wives and husbands and children of therapists who were traumatized by their therapist, psychologist, husband or father or mother. Right. So it doesn't mean you've integrated your shadows. It's like the personal trainer who's overweight. I don't work with somebody any coaches or anybody, until I have witnessed them the way that they interact in their relationships. And the sad part is a lot of times, especially in the professional designations, they encourage the psychologist, the family therapist or whatever, to not mention anything about their own personal lives. So they're teaching not from necessarily an embodied place, but because they have the plaque on the wall. I want to learn from the one who's living it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And your empathy and your perspective is so powerful. That's a gift for the therapist listening, right? To encourage them and invite them to do their own work. And if you're turning down a client, couple or not, ding, ding, ding. What does that say about you?
Something to look at. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. Not to say you have to. And it's like, if you're overweight, and you can't go up the stairs, you don't have to. Nobody can force you to lose weight. It's got to be on you. Just like in a couple situation, how one person wants to look at themselves, the other person doesn't want to do it. You can't force somebody to do it. Looking at your own shadows requires you to get to a place where you're like, I can't keep going like this.
Yeah.
Right. So use your triggers as mirrors.
Yeah. And I invite everyone to just take a breath. This is deep. This is a little anxiety
triggering, perhaps.
Triggering. So let's take a breath.
Yeah.
Now, if you can connect this with the brilliant part that you describe about, we have to really embrace the villain journey, not the hero journey, which goes hand in hand with the co-rescuing. So what is this like? Nobody wants to embrace their inner villain.
No.
You had to, Dr. Nima. Yeah. You had no choice.
Yeah. Think about how many relationships with staff, team, with people that you still hold on to because setting a boundary and saying no or advocating for yourself would cause the other person to get upset, and you don't want to upset them. So you withhold the truth so that you can remain the good guy. And then you end up resenting them and then resenting yourself.
Did you know 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue this year? That's why I created Mental Health Threads, to spread awareness and break the stigma around mental health. At mentalhealththreads.etsy.com, you'll find a collection of inspiring and fun products, from t-shirts and hoodies to mugs, hats, candles, and more, all featuring positive messages that encourage self-care and mental well-being. Best sellers like Go to Therapy, Love Wins, and Still Here are fan favorites, along with our signature semicolon designs and Pride collection. Therapists especially love our exclusive items like Licensed Listener and Professional Secret Keeper. Our mission is to spark important conversations and remind you that you are not alone. If you're ready to make a statement and support mental health, head on over to mentalhealththreads.etsy.com today. Let's make mental health a priority together.
And so this is what's the Fawn response. It's unconsciously, the Fawn response is an attachment strategy. It's like fight, flight, and freeze. We know about that, but people don't talk about Fawn. This is the most insidious, common experience where it's an attachment strategy where you're manipulating the perception of the other person to see you a certain way, to signal agreement when deep down you're not that. It's culturally, that's what every Persian is culturally. I'm Persian. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of the culture. It's called taruf. Taruf is actually fawning. It's a form of social politeness, of self-abandoning. And so what happens is we abandon ourselves to maintain that the other person like us, and we end up betraying ourselves, creating resentment towards the other person and towards ourselves. It impacts your health. Most people with autoimmune issues, if you're listening, you have autoimmune issues, look carefully. You're probably fawning and you don't know, which means you don't know how to set boundaries. You don't know how to say no. So your body's symptomatology becomes the boundary for you. And this is why I left chiropractic to teach this, because everybody coming in with chronic pain and chronic illness was actually the body not betraying them. They were trying to be the boundary that they didn't want to be. So I was like, oh, my job is to help people heal from what causes them to not set boundaries and say no. And so we are terrified of being seen as the villain in someone else's story. But what I discovered is that your freedom from the matrix, from being in this toxic relationship dynamic that you are too afraid of leaving, is the willingness to be seen as the bad guy. In my relationship, when things would get volatile, I was teaching groups of people, but living something totally incongruently, because we were in a toxic relationship, but I was teaching about personal development and healing and relationships. So I was living totally incongruently. And my girlfriend at the time knew that. And so when we would get into arguments, she would use that as a threat. She would use that as a threat, is that if I told people, if I'm going to tell them about you, and that fear of being seen as something less than this public perception of Dr. Nima that I was putting out there terrified me, because I hadn't integrated my shame. So anything that our narcissistic parts are terrified of feeling shame. So we'll do everything. We put on a mask, wearing this mask to cover up this inherent shame. And she could see that. So she could actually poke at it and use that to threaten me. And that's what basically, so I would stay after the incident happened. She would threaten to expose it or do a police report. And in exchange for, if she didn't do that, that I would stay with her, do the work to heal and keep that relationship going and pay her money. So I was fawning and for such a long time that this fear of being seen as the bad guy turned me into one. And I reacted. I eventually became one. So I was like, fuck it. I finally pulled away. And then that's when I kind of pulled away energetically. That's when she filed the police report, completely shifted her identity to being a survivor. And now the very thing that I was most terrified of, which was being seen as the bad guy, I became the bad guy when I wanted to leave. So what I discovered, and this is something I really wanted to share with you and the listeners, is that only until you're willing to be seen as the bad guy can you be free. If your fear of being seen as the bad guy is keeping you locked into that toxic dynamic, and your freedom happens when you have the willingness to be seen as the bad guy in another person's narrative and still learn to love yourself. And that's the journey of becoming trigger proof.
Yeah. And
tell me what comes up for you as I share that.
I mean,
coming up for you.
I'm really moved, because you're sharing something that most people would continue to keep hidden. Most people wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to go on the podcast circuit and share about this personal story and raise my hand and say, yes, that's me.
That's me.
Yeah. And that is just a way that helps us, because you're inviting us to take this risk to be seen as the bad guy, which again, yes, it's part of those triggers. It's part of unhealed childhood wounds. We couldn't be seen as the bad kid, or if you were already named the villain or something like that. And the willingness to be misunderstood by others. We have all of these social pressures and we have to conform or, do the comparison.
Yeah.
So what about just, it doesn't matter. We can be understood and still be okay.
Misunderstood.
Misunderstood. Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yes. So becoming trigger proof is really about alchemizing the shame, creating and expanding your capacity to be seen as the bad guy and to be misunderstood. And this is why I call it the hero's journey, but it's also the villain's journey, I affectionately say. And so that's the title of my book, is Becoming Trigger Proof, a guide to break free from trauma bonds, heal codependency, and attract and create secure love. And part of that is the willingness to be seen as the villain. And so I actually offer the first chapter in the intro in my book where it comes in. It's right on my website, and you get on the list. So when it's launched, you get first dibs and kind of like the pre-order offers that are coming out. So I really go deep into the story because I've unpacked it in such detail, because I wanted this, this failure, this epic, public, colossal, shameful failure that I've gone through. First and foremost, I want to be able to look at my son and tell him with pride as to who I've become, which I'm very proud of. He's now 5. This happened years before he was born. And, because this has become public, it's going to impact him. And I want to make sure that he's prepared, number one. Number two, that he's raised in an environment where he's able to recognize healthy, secure attachment and not use relationships to finish the business that me and his mother created in him. So everything that you're hearing is an integration of my own inner work. The work lives in my bones. And I love helping liberate people from the shame of their secrecy and silence.
Yeah. Yeah. Your passion comes through, and really, I like that word, alchemize. It's so much more sparkly than just shedding light, shining light on shame.
It's dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that you're Persian and there are, those cultural expectations to Fawn, really what you're also describing is breaking some of that collective, it becomes trauma. Maybe it's not meant to be trauma from, the cultural perspective, but you're reframing that. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about culture and trauma in that context and with family.
Yeah. The first thing that's important to do, Sindee, is to really describe and really distinguish what trauma actually is. Trauma is not what happened to us. Okay. So everybody thinks of trauma as physical violence, sexual abuse. Yeah. Of course, that's traumatic, but that's not what trauma is. Trauma is what's happening inside of us, with the absence of an empathetic witness to help us process it through. So if you're a child and you reach for something at somebody's home and your parent comes up to you and slaps you and tells you, don't do that. You're supposed to suppress your truth. It's very rude. The child all of a sudden gets constricted, and there is an activation that happens inside of them. And most parents, especially if you have boomer parents like I did, don't have emotional attunement to be able to sit down and help your activation that goes up here in your nervous system to come back down. Like with Dominic, sometimes stuff will happen and I see just by the cues on his face, his nervous system becomes dysregulated. After I take a breath, I come back and then I meet him where he's at. And then I know how to bring him back to safety and then get back into play. So no rupture that me and my son have had in the 5 years has ever resulted with him not having a repair, where that activation of high activation is now brought back down to safety. Like, hey, let's have a repair. My wife and I, we don't have anything between us because every rupture that we've had, there's been a repair. So we aren't carrying and burying resentments with each other. And if we'll have a good conversation, maybe some tears, and then bring back to balance. But that's the importance of bringing the system back to balance. But if you were raised in an environment where you were punished, or it wasn't even physically violent, but there was any activation, but it wasn't brought back to repair, that activation still lives inside of you, and it gets triggered through these events throughout your life. Things are spoken in a certain way that regresses you back there. And when you go back there, you're not in the now, you're back into that 8-year-old kind of framework.
Yeah.
And so most of us are living lives constantly triggered in that old framework through culture, through family systems, and it's happening inside of us, even to the point of like receiving feels uncomfortable for you because you were raised where you were the one that was supposed to be the helper. So receiving for you feels dysregulating. So that's traumatic to the system. So trauma is happening inside of us, and it happens so insidiously. And fawning is a very good example of how we react to creating safety. It's like every reaction is so that we can create safety. All
Yes.
behavior is an attempt to regulate. And
We're trying to create safety and protection for ourselves.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And even as you describe that, it's so helpful because most of us can feel a little bit of that inkling of the younger self, that part that still isn't healed, whether it was from a critical remark or from, some rupture that's still raw.
100%. It's there. It's in our body. And so the trigger proof model is really about using the triggers, not as something to avoid, but as a window, a portal to being able to go from your head where you get anxious, dropping into the body, and then going and finding within the body those younger parts and then parenting them again, reparenting, as they say, bringing them in, self-regulation is really about internal co-regulation. So it's co-regulating with those younger parts, which causes your brain to start to neuroplastically rewire to bring your adult self online. You become more emotionally mature. You're able to speak up for yourself. You're not so needy in relationships. When things get uncomfortable, you can ask for space. You can advocate for yourself. So this is all bringing the adults. Becoming trigger proof is really about bringing your adult self back online.
Yeah. Beautiful. We need that adult self to be functioning, our higher functioning self versus that, adaptive child or hurt inner child or whatever you want to call it. So let's say somebody's listening, Dr. Nima, and they're really touched. They're really starting to reflect, and they're like, oh, I have some problems in my relationship. Like maybe they're noticing we have conflict, or I do that thing. I do the withdrawal. I do the avoidance, or she keeps coming after me, asking me questions, and I need some space. Like, first step, what, or not even first step, but like, what would you say to that person listening who wants some help, but doesn't really know, like, how to even start? Because most of us don't know how to start.
Yeah. Great question. Where do we begin?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is I would begin by first saying, number one, it's not your fault that you're in this stuck place, because unless you had unicorn parents who could model secure relationships to you, then you shouldn't know. You're not entitled to know. Just like you're not entitled to know how to play the piano either, unless you've actually learned how. It's the first thing. The second thing is to really ask this question is, yes, there's challenges in this relationship, but what part of me does need to grow up?
Oh, I love that.
It's a really humbling question. And when I asked myself that, I really looked and I thought, okay, after I'm 43, another failed relationship, several after my divorce, if I had a daughter, would I want her to marry somebody like me? And it was really painful for me to go, I would warn the shit out of her about guys like me. And I was like, okay. So once that humbling look, if you're willing to stop looking in the magnifying glass at the other person and pick up a mirror instead and go, all right, what within me needs to grow up? Who would I have to be? So really go, what is it that I really want? I want a healthy, secure relationship where I'm not abandoning myself for the sake of connection. I want to be in a dynamic where we're both all in and we're working as a team and it's mutual, where I'm not carrying all the emotional load, where we're both actively responsible and we're both working to grow together and use the relationship as a place to evolve and heal and grow together. Because you know it's not like, let's get out of fantasy here. There's no such thing as a fantasy relationship beyond the 6 month to one. After the honeymoon phase is over,
Right.
honey, the reality comes in and we got to go to phase 2, which is the power struggle phase, where all your wounding is going to get activated. I want to be in a relationship with someone who's on board with using the relationship as a place of healing. So the first step, as we're talking about steps, is identify exactly what you want. When I ask people, they're like, I don't even know, because I don't even know that that's possible. I want you to know what's possible for you. It's your birthright, is a stable and secure relationship where closeness feels really great and separation feels just as good. It doesn't cause anxiety for you to leave. Like, I just came back from a Whistler ski trip. I have a ski pass, and I decided that in my rich life, I would love to go skiing at Whistler at least once a week, once every 2 weeks. And my wife is totally on board, but it sometimes means that I'm going to go spend a night in Whistler and be away from my son and my wife. And so when we separate, we're like, oh, we miss one another, but it doesn't create anxiety and tension and like fights when we come back together or we separate. So what you're looking for is safety in closeness and safety in separation. Like, she doesn't worry about what I'm up to over there.
Yeah,
She knows
exactly.
that I love skiing, and I never for 1 second doubt what she's up to. So what we really want, let's identify what we want. We want a secure connection. That's number one. And then you're going to ask the question, what within me needs to change? What within me needs to evolve, to grow? What parts of me that keep getting triggered, that cause me to push love away or get so clingy and needy that it actually ends up, causing them to, abandon me anyway, because I'm so afraid of abandonment that I act in ways that cause them to abandon me anyway. What needs to change? Those two things. And then finding a guide and a community, other than reading all of holistic psychologists' books and watching all the YouTube videos and listening to the podcasts. The most important thing is implementation. We are not lacking. We are not lacking information. There is tons of it.
Too much.
We're lacking leadership. So find somebody, a guide and a community who can lead you not into just validating your own victim story, but helping you transcend it by empowering you that you weren't so powerless in the dynamic. And so to help you find that power so that you can create it, and preferably somebody who's actually living it themselves. So you want to really look at their lives. Are they living what they're teaching, or is it just lip service? And so you can tell by their embodiment, right? And so that's my recommendation.
That's so great. I definitely want to make sure we can kind of type that out, because that's super helpful and really says so much about why you're so transparent, right? People see that, you have become a leader in your own life and a mentor for others, and you are walking the walk.
Yeah. Not perfect, right? It's not about finding a guru who's perfect. No, find somebody a group, a container, who will partner with you to help you reflect whatever's missing, and with a non-judgmental place, help guide you into owning your own power, right? And who's clearly living it themselves, not in perfection. But in my groups, I'm constantly like, all right, so guess what? Last week, my wife and I, or this weekend, my wife and I had a rupture. I'm going to take you through everything that caused it and how we got through it. Because now my relationship has become this laboratory where we're living life, raising a kid, and with all the craziness of politics and everything that's happening. And then as we reconnect and we go deeper into love, I gain this awareness. As I integrate it, I just feel more inspired to share the contents of my work so that other people can see themselves in it and go, oh
Exactly.
God, like I can do this too. I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
It's messy. Repair
It's
is
messy.
messy. Being
Just
a
like
human
me.
is messy,
Yeah.
just like me. And I don't have to be perfect, but I can be real. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
that's my
And maybe
frame.
with even, different disclosure, but just this week I was sharing with a couple. Yeah. Over vacation, I, was not my best self with my husband. And I, said something that I had to apologize and repair. And you know what? I even took the next day, I had to do it again. The more we can be honest, the more it helps people see.
She's human. Oh no,
We're
God forbid you're not a robot.
all in this together, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Lucky for us, you have a book coming out. Do you know when?
No, it's not 100% clear. There is some legal stuff that I have to kind of like identify. I have a legal team kind of going through to make sure that what I put out there is kind of aligned with, what can I say? You know what I mean? It's like,
I see.
what can I say? And so it's like I want to push the boundary of like what I can say in my experience. So the first chapter is there. It's available. The book is done, by the way.
Amazing.
It's just I'm working on the launch date is what my team is working on.
Okay.
But
Well, we'll include that in the show notes once you have it, because it will always exist. And it's a great way that we can learn from you.
Sure.
I'm so grateful, Dr. Nima. I really want to acknowledge the amazing work you're doing in this world, impacting individuals, couples, families, and cultures at large. It's what we need more of. And this has been inspiring. I hope everybody is reflecting about their own lives and what they want more of. Look in the mirror, take responsibility, dream a little bit that you don't have to be stuck. And that's an amazing invitation to everyone. So thank you for that. Please share where people can find you and all of those things that are coming up.
drnima.com or becometriggerproof.com. And just go in there and all the resources. The best place to begin actually is the attachment style quiz. And that's all there. I'll give you the link for the show notes. Where I began was to really understand my attachment style. And once that's there, you know what it is. There's a clearer path on the parts of you that need to grow up, that you need to work on so that you can have an experience in relationships where you feel emotionally safe, but you're also able to provide that for somebody else.
Yeah, that's great. And therapists listening, you can share that link with your clients and then work on attachment. So this is all amazing. And maybe when your book comes out, we can have you back on that. I'd really like that.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nima. And thank you for spending your time listening today. And until next time, remember, keep it simple and keep showing up.
Thanks for listening to A Simple Therapy podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. Your support means so much. You can learn more or get in touch at asimpletherapypodcast.com. And remember, let's keep it simple and keep showing up.